بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, my dear viewers, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for today's lesson in the commentary of Aqeedah Sanusiyyah. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the understanding, and may Allah make this gathering a reason for our sins. May Allah forgive our sins, and Allah answer our prayers, and may Allah bless us with protection from all calamities, trials, tribulations in dunya and akhirah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with husnul khatima. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah ta'ala, before we continue for our today's class, let us look back at what we mentioned last week. So basically we are speaking about the rational proofs for the omnipotence, will, knowledge in life. And I believe we have covered the proof for the Kuliah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the irada of Allah, the ilm, al-ilm, and then we have al-haya. And these are the four attributes. We call them part of the qualitative attributes, sifatul ma'ani. What are the proofs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described with these four attributes? So when it comes to omnipotence or power, we spoke about the universe, that this universe is in existence, and the one who brought this universe in existence must be ascribed with al-Qudrah, must be Qadir, must possess the power. Otherwise, this universe cannot be in existence. So we can understand that the one who brought this universe to existence must possess power. If we say that he doesn't possess any power, then he will have the inability to bring this universe in existence. And the fact that this universe in existence based on our observation, so this is a proof that the one who brought this universe in existence possess the attribute of Qudrah. This is point number one. Point number two, he must also possess irada, specification and will, because all these equations are specified. The time of his existence, the place of his existence, the nature of his existence, the characteristics of his existence, the colors, the sizes, all these are specified. So the one who brought this universe into existence, not only must possess power, but must possess will to specify. He specifies the existence of human beings, the existence of animals, the different types of animals, and the functions, and so on and so forth. So this is a result of specification. So he is murid, he possesses the attribute of irada. This is point number two. And the one who brought this universe into existence, he must possess knowledge of everything. So it is impossible for a person to invent something that he does not know what is it. This is impossible. So the fact that this universe is in existence, and that it is functioning perfectly, that it is out of specification, out of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it shows the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he knows everything that is within his creation. So he must possess, he must be ascribed to al-ilm, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ascribed the attribute of knowledge, al-ilm. This is point number three. Point number four, all these attributes, al-Qudrah, al-Irada, al-Ilm, it all points out of the attribute of life. Because it is impossible that something possess power, possess knowledge and will, but does not possess life. It is impossible. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ascribed as al-Hayy. So these are basically the things that we mentioned in our last lesson. And before that, we spoke about kasab. I believe I have explained it thoroughly. the meaning any of kasab any when we spoke any about the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that nothing other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can cause effect. We mentioned any that Allah any is a doer of everything, and that the creations are all means and asbab. So he gave any examples any of water cannot quench any the thirst, knife any cannot cut, everything any happens any by the permission any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taib. So this is what any I mentioned, I summarized any earlier, and I believe any we have read this. So you say if knowledge any was negated, all contingent things would be negated because it is impossible to intend something unknown. That's what I mentioned earlier. If life any was negated, all of these attributes would have been negated, and no contingent thing any would exist, because if there is no life any, then every attribute any will not be in existence, and that is impossible. Direct observation proves, direct observation any, our observation any of the existence any of the universe, and it proves that it is impossible to negate the existence of contingent things. So if the negation of contingents any is proven false, the negation of any of these attributes is also proven false. Now any we see any the effects any of the attributes, the existence any of the universe, that it is specified, and then the manifestation of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah yani is in existence, and his existence and he has no beginning and no ending, as what we mentioned earlier in the sifat and salbiyah. So and then our observation any of the existence any of the universe. So he said the negation of any of the attributes is so proven false, yani of as-sama' wal basar wal kalam. Number one is dalil any from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned laysa kamithlihi shay'un wa huwa as-sami'ul basir. Allah is as-sami' al-basir. Allah is all hearing, all seeing. This is the meaning of the book yani al-kitab in the Quran. That there are many verses in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that he is all hearing, all seeing. So this is any dalil naqli. This is any dalil any based any on the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise any we have the sunnah of the Prophet, the verse pertaining to Musa alayhi salam, and for example Allah say wa kallama Allahu Musa taklima, Allah spoke any to Musa alayhi salam. So the attribute any of al-kalam any is also established any in the Quran. And likewise any the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he spoke any about the 99 names, and for example the hadith, part of it any is Sami' al-Basir, Mutakallim. So these are the evidences, and likewise any the rational any evidences, the rational evidences any that is going any to be mentioned any by the author any after this. So when it comes any to the Quran and the Sunnah, and it's very clear that it is established any in the Quran and the Sunnah for all any these three attributes. And then he mentioned the rational proof. Now he is going to speak any about the rational proof any behind these attributes. So he said the rational proof any is to say, if Allah the Exalted was not described with these attributes, it will necessitate that he is described with the opposites. And if we were to say, for example, that Allah does not any possess the attribute of hearing and sight and speech, then it will necessitate, yani it becomes any necessary that na'udzubillah min zalik, that Allah yani is ascribed by the opposites. What are the opposites? The opposites any of hearing and is deaf, the opposite any of sight any is blindness, and the opposite any of speech any is dumb or muteness. So this is impossible that God be ascribed any to something any that is what you call it, something any that is impossible. It is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani to be ascribed any with imperfections upon. Yani all these are basically imperfections. These opposites are imperfections. That is why he said these opposites any are imperfections, and it is not permissible for us to ascribe them to the glorious master, yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is impossible any that a person says na'udzubillah min zalik, Allah is blind, for example, or Allah yani is deaf. Of course, any if a Muslim say this, any this will lead any to apostasy. But rationally, it is impossible. And if a person and he says any that God any does not hear any, that then he is deaf. This is impossible. This is an imperfection. This is a shortcoming, and this is impossible for God any to be ascribed any by shortcomings, because imperfections and he said are impossible for him. This means that it is impossible both textually and rationally. Textually, any meaning going back to the Quran and Sunnah. That in the Quran and Sunnah it is established. Rationally also, we say if Allah any were not to be ascribed any with hearing and sight and kalam, then he will be ascribed with the opposites, and this is any impossible rationally. So this is how any we understand the rational any evidences any on these any three attributes. If he is not described with this attribute, it follows that he is described with the opposites: deafness, blindness, muteness, because that which is described can be ascribed with either itself. Yani just like any when you say, for example, a person and is brave, and meaning he is not coward. When we say a person and is knowledgeable, meaning and he is not ignorant. So this is how we ascribe. Yani the moment yani you ascribe any something, then automatically you are negating any its opposite. Automatically you are negating any its opposite, and it is impossible any to ascribe something any at the same time. And to say, for example, knowledge and ignorant, a person and what you call it, knowledge and ignorance any at the same time. Yani you saying any, for example, a person is knowledgeable and ignorant and at the same time, and this is any impossible. And if he is any knowledgeable, any meaning and he is not ignorant. If he is ignorant, then he is not knowledgeable. Likewise, any if he is brave, then he is not coward. If he is coward, then he is not brave. And we cannot be saying any he is brave and coward any at the same time. So now any he said, because any that which is ascribed can be ascribed any with either self, is like, or its opposite. Yani when you do a description, we can either describe by the opposite, yani by negating any the opposite, or by what you call it, ascribing any attributes by themselves, or the opposite by negating any the opposites any of those attributes. It's like any or its opposite. It is impossible any for him to be described any with these opposites, because they are imperfections, and imperfections are impossible for him, because they entail that he needs one who can remove them. Yani for example, yani if a person na'udzubillah min dhalik says any that God any is God any does not any possess the attribute any of hearing, any that entails any he is deaf any, for example. So if he is deaf, then he is in need any of something else any to remove any this deafness. So now any we are saying that God any is in need, and this is any impossible. This is any impossible. Any God any must be self-subsistence, and he cannot any be in need any of something else, or possessing any imperfections any which he need something else any to remove any that imperfections any from him. This is any all these any are impossibilities, because they entail that he needs one who can remove them, and being in need negates self-sufficiency, and negation of self-sufficiency is impossible, and it is impossible any that God any is in need, because God any is self-sufficient. Then any he mentioned, notice you should know that the textual proof for hearing, sight and speech is stronger than the rational proof. Yani as Muslims, of course, when we read any the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, any Allah any speaks any about himself, and Allah taught us any about his names and his attributes. Now this is far much any greater evidence any than any the rational any proof. Now, and then any he mentioned the rational proofs any for the impossibilities. So now any we have completed the rational proofs any for all the sifat ma'ani. So we spoke about the proof any for al-wujud, sifat ma'ani. We spoke about qudrah, irada, ilm, haya. Then earlier any we spoke about sama', al-basar and al-kalam. And all the 7 attributes and we have spoken any about the rational any proofs, the proofs any for the existence any of these attributes. And before that also we spoke about sifat salbiyah, al-wujud, al-qidam, al-baqa, mukhalafatul lil hawadis, qiyamuh bi nafsihi, wahdaniyah. So we have spoken about all the sifat al-wajibah, the attributes any that are necessary any for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now any we are going any to the second part. The second part any the author any speaks any about the impossibilities. What are the rational proofs any for the impossibilities? So once any we understand what are the rational proofs any of the necessary any attributes, and understanding the necessary any attributes, then automatically we will understand the impossibilities. This is what he said. He said that the rational proofs for that which is necessary for Allah entail rational proofs for that which is impossible any as well. What is the meaning? Yani for example, when we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an existence, and the existence any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we look any at this universe and we understand that this universe and is contingent and it has a beginning, and there is that it is brought into existence. It is not something any that create any himself. It is in need any of the creator, and that creator any is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the moment any we establish any that God is in existence, then we at the same time also any we say that it is impossible that he is non-existent. So the moment any we establish his existence, so automatically any the impossibility any is that he is non any existence. And when we are able to prove any all these attributes, any the impossibilities any can be understood as well. Likewise, any when we say that Allah has no beginning, and so we spoke any about the evidences any behind al-qidam, the pre-eternality any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once any we understand that Allah has no beginning, then it is impossible any for Allah to have a beginning. So the impossibility comes any as well. This is what any he meant. Likewise, any when we speak any about all any attributes which are necessary, whether we are speaking about salbiya, ma'ani, mukhalafatul al-hawadis, qiyamu bi nafsihi, wahdaniyah, we spoke any about all any the proofs any behind sifat any salbiya. Automatically and we understand any the impossibilities, that once and we understand all these attributes are necessary, then it is impossible any that it is not in existence. So he said that which is necessary can only be affirmed by negating the impossible. That which is necessary can only be affirmed by negating the impossible. And how can you affirm the existence any of Allah when you knew the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, and you understood any rational proofs for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible and to be non-existent. And it basically the same thing as what I mentioned any earlier. So the moment any we establish necessary any attributes, meaning the meaning any of necessary attributes, the attributes any that are always in existence, it is impossible any for the attributes any to be non-existent. So all these are the impossibilities any by negating them. So we affirm the necessary any attributes by negating any the impossibilities to those attributes. Then he mentioned, for example, so now he gives an example. It is impossible for Allah to be both all-knowing and not any all-knowing. As what I mentioned any earlier, this is an example any of contradictories. So when we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing, meaning he is not ignorant. And when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing, yani he is not yani ignorant. But we cannot any be saying that he is all-knowing and not all-knowing any at the same time. This is impossible, because contradictories any are impossible. If that were possible, it will entail the gathering of two contradictories, and this is any impossible. Any rationally, two contradictories any cannot gather, and that is false. That being said, he is either all-knowing or he is ignorant, and there is no third any alternative, because any these are two different any opposites. Since we have affirmed that he is all-knowing, now this is the thing. Since we affirmed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing, and we spoke any about dalil naqli and dalil aqli, about the knowledge any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he cannot any be ignorant. So ignorant becomes an impossibility. Correct or not? Because any we have affirmed that Allah is all-knowing, and it is impossible any that two attributes which are different and need to be present any at the same time. Two contradictories any are impossible. So he cannot any be ignorant. The same any can be said for the remaining attributes any as well. The remaining attributes any, whether we are speaking about sifat salbiya or nafsiya yani, or sifat yani al-ma'ani. So mashallah yani we have completed yani the proofs yani for the impossibilities. Aywa. I hope any it is clear inshallah any for those any who are following any the class. I believe any all these things any we have mentioned any a few times any even in our previous any classes. So I don't think any there is a real need any for me any to elaborate any further, because to me there is no problem inshallah ta'ala. Easily any can be understood. Now, so now any we have spoken about the necessary attributes sifat al-wajibah, and then we spoke any about sifat the mustahilat, the impossibilities any for Allah. And now any we go to the third one, that is the jaizat. So we have wajib, mustahil, jaiz, and all this goes back into ahkamul aql. So when you study Aqeedah, you study any sifat al-wajibah first, and then you study the mustahilat, and then you study the jaiz. So in Aqeedah Sanusiyyah, last time when we speak about jaiz, and we say the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yani action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is jaiz. Attributes of Allah are wajib. Impossibilities are things that cannot be in existence, and we mentioned the opposites of those necessary attributes that cannot be in existence. And then we have the jaiz, the possibility. The jaiz, that is the possibility. What is possible for Allah? Yani al-ijad wal-i'dam. Yani to create something or to not to create. This is the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we say this is jaiz for Allah. It is not something that is wajib upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not forced for Allah. So now, the author now, of course, now we are speaking about the barahin, the proofs. So he said the proof that Allah can effect the possible or leave it. The proof, what is what is the proof? So he said, if it were rationally necessary or impossible for Allah to effect something that is contingently possible, the contingently possible, the existence or non-existence of which the mind judges as equally plausible, would be necessary, and the mind could not conceptualize its non-existence. Okay, now we go slowly. Now the author is saying that the rational proof behind the jaiz, the thing that is jaiz for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is action for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The proof for its possibility and not necessary or impossible. Meaning, we cannot be saying that the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give effect, to bring into existence or not to bring into existence any of created things, we say this is jaiz for Allah, not wajib for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not something that is necessary. Point number one. Point number two also, we say this is not impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is possible. So it is not any wajib, and it is not mustahil. But what is it? It is jaiz. Action of Allah is jaiz, not wajib, not mustahil. So now the author goes by speaking about what if a person says that the action of Allah is wajib, which is not true, of course. But what is the rational proof for us to rebut this false this false claim? So this is what he said. If it were rationally necessary, and this is wajib. For those who have the book, you might want to write wajib. Wajib aqli. We are speaking about wajib aqli, not wajib adi. Wajib aqli. If it were rationally necessary or impossible, mustahil aqli. So definition, by now we have to get it right in definition. When we say wajib aqli, meaning something that cannot cease to exist. It must always be in existence. This is the meaning of wajib. Wajib aqli. It does not accept. It does not accept non-existence. Whereas any mustahil aqli, it does not accept existence. Mustahil aqli, when we say impossible, meaning cannot exist. Whereas wajib aqli, it cannot accept non-existence, and it must always be in existence. The action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not wajib and it's not mustahil. The action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Jaiz. Now this is the thing, that first point, and we have to have it in our mind, so that we are not confused, inshallah. So now when he says, if it were rationally necessary, what if, this if, so what if, the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is necessary or impossible to effect something that is contingently possible. So what will happen is that the contingently possible, the existence or non-existence of which the mind judges as equally plausible, would be necessary, and the mind could not conceptualize its non-existence. So let me give you an example ya Jamal. So the example will be this thing. This is a mouse. So this is an example of a contingent being. This is an example of a contingent being. So what is the meaning of contingent being? We say this is Jaizul Wujud. So Jaizul Wujud, the definition is something that accept any existence and non-existence. Today it is in existence, and before 100 years ago it is not in existence. Today it is in existence. After some years it will be non-existent. So this is the meaning of Jaizul Wujud. Likewise for ourselves. When we look at ourselves, we are Jaizul Wujud. We accept non-existence and existence. This is what he said, that the mind judges as equally plausible. Because when you say something that is mumkin or jaiz, it is equal, 50-50, meaning it can accept any non-existence, it can also accept existence. It is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that specifies whether it is in existence or non-existence. But if you were to say, for example, the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is necessary, and this particular contingent being is the result of the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is a contradiction. How can you say that action is necessary, but the effect of that action is contingent? Now it is what you call it, impossible. It is impossible. So this is what he said, that the mind cannot imagine that something that is jaizul wujud to be wajibul wujud at the same time. Can something be jaiz and wajib at the same time? Impossible. Because when we say something that is wajib, meaning it cannot accept non-existence. But can this thing accept non-existence? Yes, it can accept non-existence. So we cannot ascribe a contingent being as necessary being. If it is contingent, it is not necessary. But we cannot be saying that it is contingent at the same time it is necessary. Now this is a contradiction. So now he said, if it were rationally necessary for him to effect some contingent impossible things, it will necessitate that all possible things are transformed into necessities. So now he is saying that if the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is necessary, then this thing must also be necessary. And if this thing is necessary, all contingencies must be necessary, and that is mustahil. Because contingent beings accept non-existence. How can it be necessary beings? So if you were to say that action of Allah is wajib and not jaiz, then the effect of that action must also be wajib. And all this mumkinat now becomes wajib. And this is impossible. Clear, inshallah? This is impossible. Now we read first, inshallah. Next week, before class as usual, inshallah, I will do also summary. Again, for those who have trouble understanding. But inshallah, it's not really difficult. It's not really difficult. Maybe if you are not used to so many of these terms and this way of writing, then maybe you find some difficulties. But actually it is not that difficult in Aqeedah, to me. If some were rationally impossible, now he speak about impossibilities. And if he says, if a person says that the action of Allah is impossible now. The action of Allah is impossible. Of course, this is worse. It will necessitate that all possible things are transformed into impossibility. Same thing. If you say that the action of Allah is impossible, then this is also impossible. Because this is a result of the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at ourselves. We are the result of what? The action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah brought us into existence, correct or not? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us into existence. If we say that this action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wajib, then we are wajib. Wajibul wujud. Now if you say that the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wajib, not jaiz, then you are also wajib. You are also necessary. Now if you say that action, na'udzubillah min zalik, is mustahil, then the effect must also be mustahil, because definition of mustahil is something that cannot be in existence. So if the action cannot be in existence, how can the effect be in existence? It is impossible. If the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible, then the effect, that is the creations, and it must also be impossible and to come into existence. And if part any of the actions any if part any of the contingent any beings any are impossible, all any contingent beings any are impossible, yani because they are same any in nature. So when we say contingent any beings, it goes any to all any contingent any beings. So by saying any part of contingent beings any are mustahil, yani you have to come to the conclusion that all any these contingent beings any are mustahil or impossible. So he said, if some any were rationally impossible, it would necessitate that all possible things are transformed into impossibilities. So basically, what he's saying that it is impossible for the action of Allah to be necessary or impossible. If the action of Allah is necessary, then the contingent beings must be necessary. If the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible, then the contingent beings are impossible. And both these situations are not true. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. This is false and inconceivable because such a proposition would entail the gathering of two contradictories. At the end of the day, you are saying that something is contingent and necessary at the same time, or something that is contingent and impossible at the same time. When you say, for example, action of Allah is wajib, yani meaning the makhluk is wajib. So makhluk is not wajib, makhluk is jaiz. So how can you say makhluk is jaiz and wajib and at the same time? This is the gathering of two contradictories. This is point number one. Point number two, when it comes to impossibilities, if you say that action of Allah is impossible, then the makhluk is impossible. If the makhluk is impossible, but yet the makhluk is in existence, the makhluk is in existence, then meaning it's not impossible. And you cannot say that it is jaiz and mustahil at the same time. So this is the meaning of gathering of two contradictories. Looking at such things as possibilities, he said, they accept both existence and non-existence. So this is the definition of possibility. A possibility is something that accepts both existence and non-existence, but not at the same time. Yani either you accept an existence and or non-existence. Now, looking at them as necessary, they can be existent because possible beings. For example, for us now, we are in existence. We are not wajib. We are not necessary. So if you say you are a necessary being, meaning you cannot come into non-existence, which is impossible. Because before this, you are non-existent. Before you came into this world, you are non-existent. So how can you be a necessary being when it is proven that you are non-existent before? Then he said, looking at them as they can be existent. Looking at them as impossible, they can only be non-existent. They can only be non-existent. Meaning, if you say that is impossible, meaning they can only be non-existent. They cannot accept existence. But possible beings accept existence. For something to accept two things and not accept any but one at the same time is contradiction and is false. Meaning to say that the possible thing can accept existence and non-existent, but at the same time, he's saying that it can only accept one, then this is a contradiction. So how can you say something that can accept two, but actually it can accept only one? That is impossible. I hope it is clear, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. If only one person, mashallah, in our class, understood, I am happy, for tonight, inshallah. Because today, in this zaman, I think we should not, put in a lot, of, what you call it, really, a lot, of hope, inshallah. Our hope, lies, in Allah. We teach, for the sake of Allah. Our scholars, mentioned based on the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hadith of Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the flag bearer to Sayyidina Ali to fight Banu Qurayza, Sayyidina Ali asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, what is your message to them? Why is the main reason I'm fighting them? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, call them towards Islam. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, and this is very important for every student of knowledge, for everyone who is teaching, especially in this time. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, لِأَنْ يَهْدِيَ بِكَ رَجُلًا وَاحِدًا خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْ حُمْرُ النَّعَمِ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said to Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, if Allah were to give any guidance to one person because of you, Ya Ali, that is better for you yani than the she camels. So our ulama ini mention yani in da'wah the success yani is not how many people yani are able yani to follow you or what you call it, but the success yani in da'wah yani is when we attain any the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what any I hope for, inshallah ta'ala. So now when he mentioned any notice, if some are necessary, all are necessary, and if some are impossible, all impossible. There is no distinction any between one contingent possibility and another. Yani meaning, when we say something that is impossible, it must be impossible, meaning it cannot be impossible and not impossible yani, at the same time. Or certain things are impossible, certain things are not any impossible. So when it comes into ahkamul aql, this many times I mention that what is necessary must be necessary. It cannot change. What is impossible must be impossible. It cannot change. What is possible must be possible. It cannot change. Yani we cannot be saying that it is there are things that are necessary, but on certain situations it is impossible. No, it cannot happen any like that. Ahkamul aql cannot change. So there is the thing. Whatever is affirmed any for something is also affirmed any for that which is like it. And at the moment any you say any, for example, contingent beings any are possible, one contingent being any is possible and it applies any to everything. But the moment any you say that a particular contingent any being now any is wajib, then you are saying any that all any contingency any are wajib, and because any they fall any under the same class. Wallahu alam any bisawab. I think I will stop here because I want any those any who are following in to digest any what I mentioned any earlier. All these things any are basically just any some additional notes any basically. But what is any the main thing any is the things any that we mentioned any earlier any in our class. Now, is there any questions any so far? I believe any there are no questions. Inshallah ta'ala, we call it a day. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.